Oh, this pain. It hurts so bad, but I can't let it go. Oh. Emotional pain is always going to be there throughout the course of your life. This is a part of our human experience. However, suffering, that might very well be a choice. What is radical acceptance and how can we practice it? This is Ramon Phipps with the detail. Stay tuned to find out. Radical acceptance. It's one of the most common things spoken about in a lot of therapeutic approaches. However, it's one of the hardest things out there to practice in regard to our overall mental experiences. When we talk about radical acceptance, we are talking about this idea of us saying and actually emotionally believing that it is what it is. But it's never just that. And this creates the real limitations that human beings experience when it comes to, of course, getting over our issues. Why do we have these limitations in the first place? Well, it can be for many reasons. It can be a grief, a resentment, an abandonment circumstance, maybe an anger, frustration that you have towards somebody. But there are viable reasons why we hang on to a lot of our emotional discomforts towards situations, circumstances, or people in our life. But when we hold on to a lot of this grief, anguish, this pain, this emotional discomfort, we sometimes lead it to developing into suffering. Now, if looking at radical acceptance, you're able to see this generalized, grandiose idea that you can really and truly accept all the negativity in your life and learn to live with it. Although it's hard, it's far from impossible. Let me give you an opportunity to see what happens when we do not practice acceptance. Just imagine this. I get cheated on. In this circumstance, I might have been vulnerably open with my partner, and that vulnerability, of course, meant that there was this great foundation of trust, and this great foundation of trust meant that we had a secure experience with each other until I was cheated on, meaning that my trust was then betrayed, now creating instability in the overall relationship. If I were to break up, if I were to leave that relationship, cut our ties, whatever it may be, and move on, pain still exists, especially if it's gone unresolved. What does that pain actually look like? Well, this pain can look like an insecurity. I may then find myself projecting this belief or this fear, more specifically, that I will again be betrayed. And this can lead to a lot of anxieties in a relationship. It can lead to mistrustful thought patterns towards your significant other. It can lead to compulsive behavioral habits that lead us into, of course, acting and reacting emotionally into situations before giving it the chance to have constructive thoughts attached to it. It can, of course, allow our anxieties to overwhelm us, putting us in these circumstances where we're obsessing, we're fixating over worst case scenarios in our future relationships. And this pattern can repeat itself again and again and again, all because of that one isolated incident of me getting cheated on, even if it happened when I was 15 years old. Let's look at another example here. Let's just say I grew up with a troubling relationship with my father. He used to abuse me, he used to hit me, he used to shame me, he used to put me down. He used to only offer me love based on conditions. If I got an A on a test, he would pat my head. If I got a D on a test, then he will scold me. These experiences may develop a lot of hard feelings. And for some people, these hard feelings can transfer themselves into resentments. Resentments that we hang on to because of the past. Now, this relationship that I have with my father, of course, people are allowed to change, people are allowed to grow, relationships are allowed to see their development. But I might actually be creating a boundary towards that because I hold on to this resentment of my childhood experience with my father, creating blockages, creating boundaries towards any possibility of me and that individual overcoming our past issues and reaching a point of cordial interaction. I create that. And again, it may be so valid in our minds why we're hanging on to this emotional discomfort, this emotional pain. However, the effects that it has on us, that's the problem that a lot of us don't allow ourselves to see, because we live in this lack of self-awareness. We live in this lack of critical examination of our life. And this, of course, will leave us susceptible to living in suffering. Your pain is valid. Your emotions towards that pain is 100% true and warranted. However, your suffering, it may very well be your choice. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people. I get it, but let's explain why. Pain is something that you can only expect to see in your life. And I remember my time growing up and exploring many different religions and spiritualities. I came to find that whether it was a polytheistic religion or of course a monotheistic religion or any spirituality in between, there was always this representation of us acknowledging that suffering is a must in our human experience. And while this is very much true, because a lot of people will fall into patterns of suffering throughout the course of their life, I like to believe that suffering might actually be a choice that we made for ourselves. Look at it this way. When you feel your emotional pain, such as you lose somebody, you now experience grief. That loss is very heavy. It's like a weight on your heart. It's like a weight on your shoulders. And it's something that you can carry into your future unresolved if we do not look at that grief and start to process it. I may have experienced a loss, but if I am always resentful towards that loss, if I'm always guilty towards that loss, if I'm always angry, frustrated towards that loss, if I live in a reality of disbelief and discontent towards that loss, then of course that loss, although it might have happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, that pain is still very much relevant and within my heart here today. Meaning that the past now affects my present dramatically without me even knowing. This pain occurred in the past. This pain occurred in yesterday, yet still it affects me today. This is how we experience trauma, for example. When we experience a trauma, we go right back into that memory, and that memory attaches itself to an emotional pain regarding that circumstance or situation. And very much when we experience flashbacks or nightmares or anything related to our traumatic responses here in the present, you're brought right back into the past. For people who have that experience with trauma, you know that they're repressing this stuff deep down inside, they ignoring it, the distractions, they do nothing, because eventually you're faced with a trigger or a circumstance that just reminds you of it, and then bam, we're right back into there. Suffering, however, I learned throughout my course of involvement in my religion, which was Christianity when I was a kid, that suffering was always going to be a part of my life. And I saw the complacency that many people adopted regarding this perspective. And while understandable, and even that in some way is a loose form of acceptance, suffering does not really have to be a definitive factor for your everyday human experience. I want you to think of suffering as prolonged emotional pain. Meaning, in the past, I experienced this pain in this one particular time on a one particular date. Now, if I do not resolve that pain, if I don't look into that pain, if I don't see how it's affected my life, then even years later, that pain is still here. This prolonged experience is now my emotional suffering. And it's something that I can't avoid. It's something that I must look at, and the only reason why it's there in the first place is because I've tried to distract or avoid that painful circumstance that happened way back when. That was a choice of mine. What if you now made the choice to actually look at your pain and see how it's affected your life, and choose to actually allow yourself to resolve this, practicing acceptance and or forgiveness? What if you empowered yourself with that belief? Is it possible that you can change your life? So what is radical acceptance? Well, in its most simple format, it's accepting things fully. It's allowing our minds to faithfully invest into this idea that I am okay with what has occurred. And we're not okay with it because it's right, because many of the things that we are resistant against accepting are unjustified, they were unfair, they were things that were out of our control. But that's the key here. There are so many things in our life that are out of our control, and we are never going to be able to control them. I don't like winter. I live in Canada. Half of the year is dedicated to, of course, the season of winter. Nothing I can do about it. Am I going to be resistant and angry towards that because I can't control the seasons? No. I gotta accept it. Taking a stance of acceptance is taking a willing stance. Because to truly invest yourself in this idea that it is okay, we're not saying it's right, we're not saying it's justified. Once more again, we are just saying that it is what it is. This is where we start to shift that perspective, shift that belief in the idea that we are powerless. Again, most of the times we are so emotionally resistant is that we are just trying to control a power dynamic deep within our psyche, deep within our mind, telling us that no, 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 I will never accept, I can't accept, how can I accept if it was so wrong, if it hurts so much? Well, again, I mean, these emotions are here, and pain tells us one very good thing. It tells us that something needs to change. So it's either I choose to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, as the good old saying says, or I try something different. And maybe that something different is me just looking right at what this pain is. Because I cannot accept what I cannot see or feel, but looking at it for exactly what it is. Was it a situation that I had no control over? Was this a situation in which I did have a lot of control over, and maybe I made a bad decision or a bad choice? Was the overall outcome within my control? Whether or not it is, I gotta take ownership and accountability either way. I gotta take ownership and accountability for the pain that has transformed itself into suffering for a prolonged period of time. I gotta take ownership and accountability for myself right here, right now. Because that's the only way I start to not move on, but move through this process of suffering if it plagues my life. To be willful is the complete opposite of what it means to be willing. To be willful is to be stubborn, is to be resistant, is to create these denial traps in our mind, allow our ego to overwhelm us, allow judgments to continue to drive our perspectives on life and how we think that we should act. This will only create more and more angst, more and more discomfort, more and more pain and suffering in your life. If you allow this mentality to be your driving force in your life moving forward, then how will resisting against emotional pain ever help you accept and resolve emotional pain? It won't. Acceptance is not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. This is a continuous battle that we as human beings face on a daily basis. And the better we do, the more we're able to actually accomplish in regard to our self-improvement or even the realistic, pragmatic goals that we set for ourselves externally. We will allow ourselves to move forward with confidence and with resolution from our past and how those insecurities, fears, all those shortcomings, all the grief, all the loss, all the anger, resentment, and frustration has affected us. You need to give yourself this option. Give yourself another option to distract yourself using something like, television or drugs, or investing yourself in your 9 to 5. I mean, these things, again, they're only distractions, meaning that you're compartmentalizing the actual pain and somewhere in your head, but it still affects you because pain does not go anywhere until it's actually resolved. Stress is not going to go anywhere until it actually resolves or sublimates itself. It's not the stress that kills you, however, it's your response to it. It's not the pain that kills you, it's your response to it. Suffering will not kill you, but it will leave you weak. And then you'll be much more susceptible to many of the stresses that life already has to offer you on a daily basis. So what needs to change? It is what it is. With that sense of empowerment, take control of your life. Take control of your emotions. Take control of your pain. Because pain is good. There is such a thing as good pain, meaning we can learn from it. We can grow from it. But we never have that opportunity if we allow pain to continue to weight us down with suffering. You truly know that you have reached a point of radical acceptance when you experience what is called a cathartic release, which is an emotional release. The best way that I can liken this in terms of our physiology is if you hold your breath for a long period of time, for as long as you realistically can. I don't care if it's 30 seconds, I don't care if it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but hold your breath, and then when you finally can't hold your breath anymore, go ahead and release it. Releasing your emotional discomforts, your emotional weights, your emotional pain feels the exact same way. It's a release. And that's all we're looking for here. But it just so happens that the process towards releasing ourselves of our past burdens throughout the process of acceptance has everything to do with looking within and jumping within our fire in the first place. But do not worry, you will not get burned. You'll only grow. This has been Ramon Phipps with The Detail. I hope you got something from this talk today. Stay tuned for more mindful content focused on mental health, mindfulness, and of course educational workshops on the same subject matter. Stay mindful.